Welcome to the Clemson Dubcast. It is Thursday, August 28th. We are here, finally, after, almost 8 months. Because remember, Clemson's last game last year was December 21st. After all that time, we finally have college football to write about here in 2 days. And what a matchup it is. You are not going to find better coverage of the run-up to and the aftermath of this epic showdown between Clemson and LSU than at TigerIllustrated.com, which is now part of the On3 network. Absolutely love all the national voices and team-specific voices we've been able to tap into. And I promise you, the list of big-name additions to On3 nationally is only going to continue. Never a better time than now to join. So this podcast has been going since August of 2018, more than 770,000 downloads of more than 340 episodes. And my great friends, Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold at Parham Smith Archenhold Law Firm, have been a part of it for every single one. They are longtime Clemson people, and they give you the experience and the results you need. Their team can help with personal injury and medical malpractice cases. They currently serve North Carolina and South Carolina with offices in Greenville, Spartanburg, and Charleston. If you or your family has been injured, I want you to help you get the compensation you deserve. Schedule a free consultation by calling 864-301-8767 or by going to parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. Celero Commerce, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. Okay, really cool to be able to get former Wake Forest coach Dave Clawson on the podcast earlier this week. He did a fantastic job at Wake Forest over 11 years and developed a really good relationship with Dabo Swinney. So a really cool chat here with Coach Clawson, followed by Bryce Koon of the Bengal Tiger down in Baton Rouge, going to give us some insight into not just the team and Brian Kelly, but the whole culture down there, the traveling circus that I think Clemson fans are about to experience here this weekend. It's going to be so cool. All right, here we go. Enjoy. Okay, joined by former Wake Forest head football coach Dave Clawson. And before I hit record here, you were playing with your dogs with squeaky toys, and you were trying to go to a quieter environment. I think that's a great lead-in to here we are, week one of college football season. It's a Wednesday morning at 8:30, and you're playing with your dogs. Is that kind of a blissful existence at this point?
Well, it's a catch-22. There's so much about being a college football coach that I miss. I miss being around the players, the staff. There's nothing quite like getting ready for game day, especially the opener. But it's definitely a little bit more of a relaxed existence right now. And, you take the time with your family and your dogs, and I'm really enjoying that. So it's a little bit of a mixed blessing.
What else are you doing? I know that, could you just fill everybody in on what you're a special assistant to the administration at Wake Forest, still in a fundraising capacity, doing some work with the ACC network. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm a special advisor to our athletic director, John Curry at Wake Forest. I'm also working with our development office. I'm doing a little bit of teaching in our School of Business. And I'm working with the ACC network as an analyst this year in studio.
Can we just perhaps go back to the decision to step away as someone who sort of surface level followed your press conferences, particularly when you were about to play Clemson in the recent years? I could just pick up the mounting frustration with the changing model with NIL, with the transfer portal, and how that really just seemed to directly counter your model at Wake Forest. Can you maybe just enlighten on what that is like dealing with the current model in that position, because it's like the exact opposite of, folks who follow Clemson and are used to Clemson problems, a lot different than Wake Forest problems.
Well, first off, I'm incredibly grateful for the 11 years I had at Wake Forest. I believed in the institution. I loved the players and the young men I got to mentor and coach. And it was a great 11 years. And at a certain point there, we were a top 10 program. We spent most of 21 and 22 ranked, and twice we got into the top 10. But our entire model there was based on recruiting guys that fit Wake Forest University athletically, academically, from a character standpoint. And then our key to the program was the retention of those players. So a lot of times we did not recruit 5-star players. We were not recruiting the same people Clemson were, but we found young men that we thought loved football, that we thought with redshirting, with development, could become excellent ACC football players. And whether it was guys like Jesse Bates, A.T. Perry, Sam Hartman, John Wofford, Boogie Basham, Justin Sternad, Asang Bassi, all those guys were not heavily recruited, but all became all ACC players, and a lot of them are still enjoying NFL careers. And when the transfer portal and collectives and NLI hit all at once, it was extremely disruptive to our model because the retention piece became really difficult. In my last 2.5 years there, we had lost 15 starters. And these were guys that in the past would have spent a 4th or a 5th year with us at Wake Forest. And I did. I got a little bit frustrated. And I think when that happens, it's not healthy for the program. And again, there's a shelf life to every coach at every institution. I loved my 11 years there, and I just thought it was time for a change. I thought it was a time for a change for me personally. And I also believed it was in the best interest of Wake Forest that with this model, to have someone that just was off to a fresh start, because I didn't want to have to cut my whole football team with revenue share. That's not how we built the program. And to have someone else come in that could, bring his own team, might be what was in the best interest of the program as well. So it was just time for a change. And I still, again, am very grateful for the time I had there. 11 years at one place in 2024 is almost unheard of. But it was just time. And I was comfortable with the decision. I miss it. I'll always miss being around the locker room and the players and the staff and getting ready for a game. But it's just, where I am and where we are in life right now.
Yeah, you mentioned how good you guys were in 21 and 22, and that was really the fruition of the sort of slow cook model that you came up with all the mass redshirting. I'm not sure everybody remembers, but that 21 team that came to Death Valley late in the year, I think y'all were favored, and I want to say all 3 of the writers at my website picked you to win. Clemson was obviously on a bit of a decline, but still, that was a really impressive. Both of those were really impressive teams. I'm not sure everybody really recalls just how formidable you guys were.
Yeah, we took a lot of pride that we had made 7 straight bowl games. We won 5 of them. And the only team in the ACC that had a longer bowl streak than us was Clemson. And so for about a 7-year period there, Clemson had the number 1 wins in the ACC, and we were kind of always jockeying with NC State and Pitt of who had the second most wins. And again, we're extremely proud of what we accomplished. And doing it in a way that we graduated players. I think we had the second highest graduation rate in the ACC. But that was kind of the old model. And, it's a new model now for college football. And I think people are going to adjust. It was just hard when we had created a model that was based, again, on recruiting, retention, development. When we were losing players as they were just getting to their best years, it made it very challenging. And again, I'm grateful that I had the time there that I did. But like I said before, I thought it was time.
When you have Sam Hartman for 5 years and then you see him go to Notre Dame and then you see Notre Dame have a video montage for him on senior night, how gutting is that?
It was hard, but I don't blame Sam at all. With the amount of money and exposure that Notre Dame was offering him, I couldn't blame him for what he was going to do. We were not in a position at that point to counter. That was really the beginning of the collective era, the NIL era. Sam had many, many significant offers, and he did not go to the highest bidder. There was other places that he could have made more money. We were just not in a position at that point to even make a counter offer. And so it was hard because I could not blame the young man for the decision he made. He gave us 5 great years. He set the ACC record for the most touchdown passes, and he was a great young man and a great leader in our program. But he had an opportunity to make a lot of money, and we were not in a position to offer anything close to what he was being offered. And so, you can't blame the young man for what he's doing, but that was a hard week that you're looking across the field and you're on the field and there's a young man that you recruited that spent 5 years in your program that was a captain for you, and now you're playing against him. But that's just where college football is in 2024, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the players do deserve to make money. And Sam had certainly done everything right in our program, and I'm still in touch with him. He just texted me the other day that the Washington Commanders played the Baltimore Ravens in a preseason game, and after the game, they took a picture of 4 former Wake Forest players, and Sam sent that to me. So, again, I'm grateful for everything Sam did in our program, and he helped lead Wake Forest to unprecedented heights.
I get this question a lot, and I can't answer it. So I guess I'll ask you. People ask me, what is the model and what is the landscape going to look like in 5 years? Do you have an answer for that?
I think with revenue sharing, it's still a little bit unstable now because this is the last year that teams could have collectives and pay players there. I think there's going to be a 2 or a 3 year period here that between revenue share and what does the NCAA allow in terms of collectives and NIL deals. But I think in 3 or 4 years, the market's going to mature. It's going to settle. And hopefully that'll create a little bit more stability. The NFL has been paying players forever, and there's an established market. If you're a all-pro left tackle, this is your market. If you're a guard, this is your market. If you're an elite quarterback, this is your market. For over 100 years, everybody in college football got the same thing, and that was a scholarship. And now starting in 2022, and now we're 3 or 4 years into this next phase, the market is starting to mature a little bit. And I think the hardest thing is a lot of players have these expectations that they thought as soon as there was revenue share, they were all going to become millionaires. And again, it's a meritocracy. There's certain players that earn it. But this year, there's still a lot of big numbers being thrown around because of the combination of collectives, NIL, and revenue share. And hopefully that market will mature and it'll settle and it'll become not an even playing field, because I don't think there's ever been an even playing field in college football, but a little bit more balanced. And so I'm optimistic that I think college football will be in a healthier place in 3 or 4 years than it is today.
there are growing calls for collective bargaining. What's your position on that, and what does that mean overall if that were imposed?
Well, that's a slippery slope. And I think that's going to be really difficult to do unless you separate football and basketball from the rest of college athletics. Because the second you collectively bargain, now you are saying that the players and the student athletes are employees, and now does the scholarship get taxed? And does that mean that the soccer player's scholarship gets taxed? And there's a lot of complications with just saying, okay, let's collectively bargain. There's two sports in college athletics that across the board, generate revenue, and that is football and men's basketball. And yes, it would be great if you could collectively bargain with those two sports. The problem is you then have to collectively bargain with every sport. And so if there's a way of separating football and men's basketball in that way, if that's possible, I think that would be helpful. But right now, the NCAA and college athletic departments include at some places 16 sports and at some places 34 sports. And so who do you collectively bargain with? What sports? How do you separate the revenue sports from the non-revenue and the Olympic sports? I think that's the challenge.
If it's collective bargaining with the two breadwinners, so to speak. Okay, so it's $20.5 million now, but if there's a players union, well, it's hard not to see them saying, wait, only $20.5 million? Because in the NFL, what is it, half? They get half of the revenues. And so then if you go up to $40 million, hypothetically, is that when you're having to cut Olympic sports? Basically, those are done.
Yeah, I mean, those are questions for athletic directors and college commissioners, not for not for college football coaches. I don't pretend to know all the intricacies that would go into that. The NFL has a players association, but their players can sign long-term contracts, and they can have more consistent representation in their union. The issue with college football is every 4 to 5 years, all the rosters turn over. And so, until that there is a union and there is union leadership, that becomes difficult. And their job is going to be to represent the best interest of the players. And I think when you get to that point, it's going to be a complete upheaval of college athletics the way we know it. I thought it was great at Wake Forest that we were all part of one athletic department. Bobby Muse, the soccer coach at Wake Forest, is still a good friend of mine. Kim Llewellyn, the women's golf coach, who's won a national championship, is a good friend of mine. You'd hate to see any decision made that would negatively impact those sports. Wake Forest just won a national championship in men's tennis. And to watch the joy of those student athletes. And again, part of the reason that those sports can exist is because a lot of the revenue from football goes towards supporting those sports. And that's going to be how things would dramatically change. If it's collectively bargaining with football, it's hard to imagine there's going to be enough money left over to support all those other sports. So if you look at college athletics as a whole, that becomes very difficult to collectively bargain. If you separate the revenue sports, it's easy, but there will be some unintended consequences, and you're going to affect the lives of a lot of really good student athletes in non-revenue and Olympic sports.
I know Dabo has a lot of respect for you. How would you describe your relationship with him over the years, dating to when you took over in 2014?
Well, first of all, Dabo and I were competitors, and in my mind, he ran the best program in the ACC. And I think if you look at his last 14 years in the last decade, in the national championships and ACC championships. But the reason I respect Dabo is, Clemson could become a football factory, but he chose not to do that. I think he genuinely cares about the players that play for him, and to have a program have that much success and to still see the graduation rates that Clemson has. We became friends during COVID. We were both on a committee during the COVID year that we were trying to figure out a way how we could play. How can we have a season? And there was 3 coaches on the committee and a couple of athletic directors. And Dabo and I would end up having a lot of conversations. And then it really developed into a friendship. We both ended up going to the Nike trip, and I got to know his wife, and my wife got to know his wife. And I just think he's a good man who's very principled. And people may not always agree with the things he says, but to me, he's true to himself. He's an excellent football coach. He cares about people. He's a good husband, a good father. I think he cares about his staff. And I've just developed a lot of respect for him, and that respect has turned into a friendship.
What's he like as a texter? Lots of emojis, I guess, is what that's the word.
No, he just always has he's got a really a sense of humor that I enjoy. Again, he's very personable, and I've probably had more phone calls with him than texts. I don't love texting. I'd rather hear a person's voice, and sometimes you get a little bit more from that than a text. But again, he's always gets back to me, and he was nice enough to invite me down to Clemson and speak at their spring clinic this year, and it was great. I got to spend time with him and his family on a personal level.
You were probably busy enough with your first year at Wake Forest in 2014, but I'm just curious, could you see it coming? Clemson about to be a total powerhouse, national titles, 6 straight playoff appearances. Could you see the makings of that before it happened?
I was so concerned with where we were at Wake Forest. I didn't have that much time to worry about Clemson. I mean, my first 2 years at Wake, we struggled in our games with Clemson. We're not very competitive. And so there was clearly a huge talent gap between where they were and where we were. But there was a pretty good talent gap between where we were and most of the ACC. And so you obviously could see with quarterbacks like Sean Watson and the skill level that they had, that they were an elite team. But again, to say that I did a deep dive and said, boy, I see this coming. I was so wrapped up in my own world at Wake Forest and trying to get us to a bowl game that I can't tell you I paid that much attention to Clemson other than, one game a year we played them and would look at their personnel, and we knew that it was always going to be an uphill battle.
What do you make of the last 4 years? Was their quote unquote down cycle? A lot of traditional powers around the country, their down cycle is dropping off the face of the earth. Florida State, I could go on and on. What does it say that during their decline, they were 40-14 and won 2 ACC titles?
Yeah, I think that after you win 2 national championships, to say that was a down cycle, that they, in the last 4 years, they've won 10, 11, 9, and 10 games. I think, 95% of the programs in the country would love to have that type of up cycle and not call it a down cycle. So I never saw Clemson having a down cycle. The nature of college football is, you're going to lose players. You're going to lose a Trevor Lawrence. You're going to lose an ETN. And to think that you're just going to replace those positions instantly with the same caliber of player. And because how Dabo builds the program in terms of recruiting, retaining, they are a developmental program. Cade Klubnik is a much better quarterback going into 25 than he was in 23. But it's because Clemson developed him and the system they have that they have a chance to have a really special year this year. I mean, he has chosen not to just every year go out in the portal and sign $1 million quarterback. There is still development in the Clemson program. And again, you're not going to win a national championship every single year, but in the last 10 years, they've almost won 120 games. You're averaging almost 11 and a half, 12 wins a year. So I don't see a down cycle at all. I think they've kept themselves near, if not at the top of the ACC. And if you're at the top of the ACC, you're going to be able to get to the playoffs. And if you get to the playoffs, you have a chance to win a national championship. So again, I think his consistency and stability is something that should be celebrated.
When you came down here during the spring, what were your biggest, most interesting takeaways in terms of what you saw during your visit here?
Well, just number one, from a facility standpoint, the facility is gorgeous. And, a lot of people talk about the slide, but that's just a fun little element. So much of that space is functional, and how much of the space is designed to make that be a place that the players want to be at. I think in 2025, creating an environment that your players want to be in the facility with the coaches, with the staff, with the support staff is important. And I think Clemson did a great job of being very intentional with how they designed the facility. And the amount of people in the building that are there to help the players in a non-football way, whether it's with academic support, whether it's with internship opportunities, whether it's life after football, whether it's making sure the guys who left early to go to the NFL come back and get degrees. Again, it was just very refreshing that in 2025, here's a program that is holistic, that cares about the total development of the young man, not just as a football player. And to see a program like that continue to thrive in an era that a lot of programs are transactional, to me was very encouraging that it can still be done that way.
Do you think maybe coaches across the country have a bit more wisdom now about that model of roster building, just given some of the drawbacks of the portal and the transactional nature of things?
Yeah, I mean, to steal a cliche, I think as NIL became legal and what it was intended to be, and then the way collectives got involved, the way it became, right? We were all learning how to fly the plane while it was in the air. And so I think overreacting and going out there and trying to spend the most money and accumulate the most talent, the teams that did that maybe occasionally had success, but did not build anything sustainable. And so everybody had a unique approach to it. I think part of your approach is based on, what is the nature of your school? Who are the players you can attract? How much money do you have? All those things factored into it. So I don't think there was one correct way to approach this. I think a lot of it depended on where you were, the school you're working at, the location of it, the nature of who you attract. And part of it is the head coach's personality. What are they comfortable doing?
You never beat Clemson, but you were in position to do it in 21, 22, 23. The 22 game was the double overtime, 51-45 up in Winston-Salem, and then 23, 17-12 here in Death Valley. How much does that stick with you? And I'm guessing there are maybe 3 or 4 plays that might stick with you or haunt you from those games?
I was enjoying the interview until now.
I saved the toughest questions for last. That's a great interview technique, huh?
Yeah, that's, I'm a competitor. It bothers me, that Clemson was really the top of the ACC. And, there's a lot of teams we had success against. We beat Florida State a few years in a row, I think 3 years in 3 consecutive games, and we beat NC State 3 consecutive times, or 3 out of 4. And then, we got Duke 3 years in a row, or 3 times in a row. The COVID year always throws a wrench in there. But Clemson was the one team we never quite got. And the 22 game probably bothers me more than any game, just because we were in a position to win it. At times we had a 2-score lead. And, to have a game like that at home, that we had a packed house and a bunch of students there, to not be able to finish that game and find a way to win it, that one will bother me to my grave. And again, that's just the nature of being a football coach and being a competitor. That, it's not a, 1 or 2 plays, it's 6 or 7 plays that if we just make one of those plays, the outcome is different. But the bottom line is that's what happens when you play football, and Clemson made some plays that we didn't, and they deserved the win. But I was certainly proud of the effort and how hard our players played that game. And it was a great college football game. And obviously I wish the result would have been different. But as a competitor, those things never leave you.
This might be a stupid question, but when you're friends, pretty good friends with the guy on the other side of the field, and you're in the middle of that competition and you've just lost a gut-wrenching game, what's it like walking to the middle of the field, seconds later to say, hey, congratulations?
Yeah, again, I think sometimes in the media you read a little too into that. When you're walking across that field, you want to show good sportsmanship. But my thoughts are more of, okay, what's going to be the message to my team? And as heartbreaking as the game was in 22, the very next week we were going to Tallahassee to play Florida State. And you'd always say, when you lose a close game, don't let it beat you twice. So as I'm walking across the field, I'm certainly going to congratulate Dabo and find some of the Clemson players that I thought played their hearts out that game. And but my thoughts are more like, okay, this was a heartbreaker. How do we get our guys back? And I was really proud. The very next week, we went down to Tallahassee and beat a very good Florida State team. And but that's, to me, the mindset of a coach. It's, this game is over. There's nothing I can do to change the result about it. You want to show sportsmanship. You want to congratulate the other coach and the other team. But, okay, how do we move on from this and get our players' minds right in that locker room so that when they come back on Monday, they're ready to work and get after Florida State?
That's fascinating. You're already turning the page. What about the flip side? After, in the immediate aftermath of an exhilarating win, are you thinking the same thing? I got to turn the page and make sure my kids don't get too high?
No, after you win, it's different, because you work so hard. The coaches work so hard. The players work so hard that any time that you win a game, I think it's really important you allow the players to enjoy it, to celebrate it. You work too hard to not enjoy those moments. And so even when you don't play well and win, I never wanted to go in the locker room and ruin the moment for them. We found a way to win a game, whether we played well or not. We won. Let's celebrate it. But even when you win a tight game like that, there's things you don't go well, and you always leave them with, hey, great effort, proud of you, but here are the things that we need to continue to work on if we want to accomplish our season goals. So we accomplished our goal for that day and that week, and we need to celebrate it. But there's always greater goals to get. There's always a game the next week or 2 weeks later, and you want to make sure that when the players go out and celebrate, that they're doing it with the whole team in mind. And you're always worried after a win, they celebrate a little too hard, that you could wake up on Sunday morning and, deal with some issues you don't want to deal with. So it was always keeping the big picture goals in mind after a win, but still allowing players to enjoy the moment.
You were on a podcast a few weeks ago with Reese Davis and Dan Wetzel, and something you said about Florida State really stood out to me. You said that you don't fall to 2-10 without there being some locker room issues. What do you make of them right now? Is it really impossible to get a read on them in the aftermath of such a disastrous season?
Well, again, Mike Norvell is a guy that I really think is a good football coach. We competed against them in a bowl game when he was at Memphis. I've become friends with Mike, and he did a masterful job in 23 of getting them to 13-0. And, losing the quarterback was a huge loss. When they lost him in the season, and then, they didn't quite get that position right the next year. And I think sometimes when you go 13-0, sometimes a lot of the players forget how hard it is and all the work that went into accomplishing that goal. And especially in an era that rosters change so quickly. So again, Mike's a good coach. I'm sure he recognized what the problems are, and I have no doubt that he's taking steps to fix them. They will be a better team this year. There's no doubt. But just like 13-0 happened, 2-10 happened. And I'm sure everybody in Tallahassee and everybody on the Florida State staff is going to be excited to play this week and turn the page on last season.
It seems like there's a conga line of national media folks who are saying Clemson's number one, Clemson's going to win it all. What do you think? Do you pay close enough attention to the national landscape to come out and say, yeah, I think they have the goods?
My focus is certainly a lot more in the ACC, but certainly keeping a picture of what's going on nationally. And I guess my point of comparison is this Clemson team looks like the Clemson teams that did compete and win national championships. Now, there's probably, 8 to 10 teams in the country that have a talent level that are capable of doing it. And it's a long season. So to even talk about a national championship before there's a kickoff at LSU or at Clemson against LSU is, that's a media thing. The season's hard, and there's a lot of games between now and even making the playoffs. They certainly have enough talent and enough continuity and good enough coaches, but part of winning a national championship is luck. Do they stay healthy? Does Cade Klubnik stay healthy? Does Antonio Williams and TJ Moore and Bryant West Coast stay healthy? Does Blake Miller stay healthy? Does TJ Parker and Peter Woods and Wade Woodaz stay healthy? When Clemson is healthy and full strength, I think they measure up with everybody. But, we're going to go through a long season here. And, whether you're Ohio State or Penn State or Clemson or, those 8 to 10 teams that are capable of winning a national championship, a little bit's luck, and you find a way to win close games. But Clemson certainly has a good enough team to put themselves in that conversation.
Klubnik, of course, took a major step last year, but is there anything that you've noticed that perhaps he needs to clean up or refine to be the truly elite quarterback that a lot of people are projecting?
Well, a lot of times a quarterback, he needs a supporting cast. And I think Cade's gotten better every year. He's now in his third season working with his offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley. And now he's surrounded by skilled players he's played with. Again, Williams, Moore, Brown, Wesco. These are all very high-end skilled players. And what doesn't get talked about enough with Cade, and maybe it does in Clemson, is just how athletic he is and how fast he is. So to me, the great quarterbacks can run the play the way the play was designed. But then when things break down, they have the ability to create. And that's what I think makes Cade special is he now has a great feel for the system. He's got a great supporting cast. And, on top of that, he has the ability to create when things break down. So I'm sure he's excited to have all those weapons on the outside. This is the best collection of wide receivers that he's had during his time there. And, I know they're very excited, about the development of Adam Randall. Certainly Gideon Davidson was a really great get for them out of Virginia. And they've got a pretty veteran offensive line. And I also think the job that Matt Luke did last year, from a coach's eyes, I thought Matt Luke did an outstanding job with their O-line last year. And I think that group will just get better. And, Tom Allen is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. So again, I think everything lines up, but you still got to play the games. You got to stay healthy, and you got to find a way to win close games.
You said from a coach's eyes, Matt Luke did a great job. What does that look like to a coach that tells you that?
I just think if you watch some of their combo blocks, some of the things they did in protection, he did a great job. I just thought his players came off the ball hard. They finished blocks. Their protections were very well thought out, and they passed things off really well. And I just thought he did a great job. I mean, Matt Luke is a high-end football coach. He was the head coach at Mississippi, and he helped Georgia to a national championship. And for Dabo to get him to come out of retirement was a great get by Dabo. And, there's a lot of coaches across the country that maybe under the radar are making huge impacts on their program. And to me, Matt Luke is a difference maker as an offensive line coach.
Do you have any history with Tom Allen?
I recruited Tom's son a little bit when he was, I believe, at South Florida before he got to Indiana. And I spent some time with him, and then I thought he did a great job at Indiana. And again, he was a little bit of a victim of the NLI collective era. They had a great year in 2020, and I believe he was the Big Ten Coach of the Year, and all of a sudden they started losing players. And so, again, I think Tom is a good man, a really good football coach, and I think he'll be a great fit for Clemson. But anytime there's a new coordinator, there's a little bit of a breaking in period. And I'm sure that defense will only get better as the year goes along, as they get more and more comfortable with how Tom calls a game and how he game plans.
Yeah, that's my biggest question, and maybe you can shed some insight here, is when you totally start from scratch with a brand new defense, new language, all that, how long is that learning curve? I know that when Garrett Riley first got here, similar situation, it took them a while to really master all that, not just the players, but the assistants as well. Can you maybe give your thoughts on that process of how long maybe that I don't know if that's probably dumb to say how long does that normally take, but just maybe a window into that process.
Well, I don't think Tom, what he does on defense is that philosophically removed from what they did. They're still a 4-down team, and he's got really good players. Peter Woods and TJ Parker, the Will Height that they signed from Purdue. We tried to recruit him out of high school, and Tom's smart enough to put guys in a position to make plays. To me, it's more, okay, game one, when the players see something that they haven't seen before, which is going to happen, are they comfortable enough with the system to fix their own problems? And there's always that balance of, you don't want to be so simple that you're easy to attack, and then you also don't want to be so complicated that the players don't understand the defense. And I think that's a feeling out process that they'll go through in September. And again, Tom is a established elite defensive coordinator. He'll figure it out. And Clemson has enough talent, and their players are smart. But there will be there will be an adjustment period like there is with any new coach, whether it's a head coach, coordinator, position coach.
Well, Coach, I'll let you get back to playing with those dogs, and really looking forward to watching you and listening to your insights on the ACC network this fall. Should be fun.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on. And again, good luck with your season as well.
As president of Harris Home in Anderson, South Carolina, Scott Junkins knows all about foundations and how to cover them beautifully. His client list includes Clemson University, BMW, and Greenville's Floor Field, along with thousands of homes and businesses throughout the area. Harris Home was previously Harris Flooring, but the next logical step was to expand beyond flooring and manage complete interior renovations. Scott has assembled an expert team that completely manages every step of any redesign project, from ideas to finishing touches with both residential and commercial projects. Open the door to more by going to discoverharris.com or by calling 864-225-8631. Listen up, Clemson Tiger fans. Founders Federal Credit Union has a new office right on campus in the Hendricks Center. We're here to serve you with the financial tools you need and the personalized service you deserve. Not on campus, Founders has an office conveniently located on Old Greenville Highway. Stop by or visit foundersfcu.com to learn more and apply for a membership. Relax, you're with Founders. Federally insured by NCUA. Membership qualification required. All right, joined by Bryce Koon of the Bengal Tiger, our On3, I don't want to say sister site. That's kind of our family site. I don't know. What's the best word?
Let's go with that. We're all a big family, a new family over here with On3.
That's right. First of all, you and I got to know each other a little bit when I appeared on y'all's podcast earlier this week, and I knew that you had been in the Atlanta area doing some media stuff, and so that sort of piqued my interest just in terms of how you have to be kind of a survivor in this day and age to do this for a living. But then I went to your LinkedIn account, and I saw that, good heavens, I mean, I see... I'm just going to go over it right here. Chick-fil-A, team member, marketing intern, fan-sided, contributing writer, Viking Fusion, Berry College, where you went to school, news reporter, Columbus Lions Club, media relations intern, Berry College, broadcast sports information assistant, Fox Sports morning show co-host, Valdosta State University, broadcast athletic communications graduate assistant, Birmingham Barons, broadcast media relations assistant, Chick-fil-A, director of training, Mercer University, radio color analyst, Salt Lake United Methodist Church, communications coordinator, sports writer for 24/7, ACC Network, play-by-play broadcaster, owner/host, the Crowded Booth podcast, and finally, Deep Breath, sports reporter, August 2025 to present, sports reporter. Wow, man, you have done it all, it seems like.
Well, man, first off, you're making me feel old, Larry. I mean, geez, we just listed that off. And, I mentioned to you before we started recording here that I've got a daughter now, and a lot of those things happened in order to, my wife said, hey, we're getting married. Let's try to find something that you're not doing 3 different jobs at one time. But no, yeah, I'm a Georgia native, grew up in Columbus, Georgia. And so, funny enough, you guys have had over at Clemson have had a lot of different guys make their way up there from, Troup County. Noah Dixon, who's on the team now, I know that family pretty well, and that staff down in Troup County. And then obviously over at Central Phoenix City, which guys like EJ Williams, and obviously a couple of more that you guys have had there. So yeah, no, it's a small world in terms of the sports media world. And before I came down to Baton Rouge and covered LSU, I was I covered Georgia Tech, who you guys have there in week 3, which should be a fun matchup in Atlanta. So yeah, it's a fun world. It's been a blast, and man, I hope to be able to continue to do this for quite some time.
If you feel old in your late 20s, I think I'm the person you need to talk to make yourself feel a little better. I am about 50, actually, am 50, but it's just so fascinating how the ladder is so much different nowadays over the last decade plus compared to when I first started. Back then it was like, okay, you intern at a newspaper in college, then you work at a small newspaper out of college covering high schools, prove yourself, work your way up to, a bigger paper, medium sized, and then if you're really, really good, just the ultimate aspiration is maybe the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Washington Post, or something like that. And now it's like, Atlanta Journal-Constitution is like they don't even really exist anymore as it, in the typical, the traditional definition of covering teams. I'm not trying to be hard on them, but I think that's the truth. I've been lucky enough to be in the same place since 2008, the same website, tigerillustrated.com, and covering the same team since 2004. So I've succeeded in making you feel young again just in saying that. But my question to you would be, I'm sure that you have like college kids periodically who might ask you for advice, like, how do I do what you do? How do I get into this business? And maybe your daughter who's with you might end up asking you that at some point as well. What is your advice? I'm just kind of fascinated to know.
Yeah, I mean, to not go into too long of a long-winded answer, and hey, we're journalists, and we like to explain our points over and over again, right? So it's one of those things for me. I went to a small school. Obviously, you mentioned there, Berry College, Northwest Georgia, beautiful campus. One of the things that I loved about it, though, is we had a work study program there, and that's kind of where, I played sports throughout high school, but, I knew I would love to try to work in sports, but at that time I just didn't know the path. And I didn't go to, in Georgia, University of Georgia has a really good journalism program. I didn't go to the Northwesterns, the Syracuses, but I knew that I wanted to do something with it. And so being at a Division III school, there's a lot of opportunity to get hands-on and be able to do, things that you want to do. And so from the time I got on campus, I was able to leave campus with working for the student newspaper, working for, as a news reporter for the little TV station we had, digital station that we utilized. So that, and then also play-by-play. I left as kind of the lead play-by-play guy in terms of when we opened our football stadium and, won 3 consecutive conference titles, and just that experience was invaluable to me. And so I think the biggest thing I tell people, and it's funny you mentioned that, I had someone call me this morning about, hey, I want to do this. What do you do? And it's like you mentioned, it's changed so much. I just think you have to say yes. And you have to understand that reps matter and experience matters. And, I'm saying this, and if my wife was here, she'd be laughing. My wife is a very well educated person, super smart, smarter than I'll ever be. And she's a doctor of physical therapy and the whole 9 yards. But I really do say it's not that education doesn't matter. Don't hear me by saying that. But when you go somewhere where you can align a good education with great opportunities and doors that can open, to me, that's the perfect balance. And so I tell people, say, hey, look, I have friends that went to Syracuse and they're doing really big things. And that's great and that's fantastic. But it's just, forcing yourself into that is not necessarily, I think, the best option. You have to look at what's best for you. And, I can really say I wouldn't be where I am today if I wouldn't have said yes to things and just done what I felt like was my own path. And so, saying yes to things, being willing to be coachable. And then the final thing is just kind of understanding that, your path is not going to be the same as someone else's, especially in this digital social media age. It's really easy to get caught up on, well, why did that person get that job? Or why did that happen like that? And why, hey, I do good work, or I think I do better work than them. That's the dangers of social media. And so I think understanding that everyone has a different path, and, Larry, if there was a guidebook on how to, get to the top, we'd all be following it and be a best-selling book, and whoever wrote it would be a millionaire. So it's one of those things where just understanding what works best for you and being willing to say yes to a lot of different things.
That's good stuff. All right, now let's get to this exhibition that's going to happen on Saturday night. First of all, we talked on your podcast about the sharp disparity in media access between Brian Kelly and LSU during August camp and Dabo Swinney and Clemson during August camp. That's not a complaint on my part. I just think it's a interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Why do you have any insight onto why things were so, I don't want to say fast and loose, but just open down there where you could see just about everything for a while?
Yeah, it's to backtrack a little bit. I mentioned I was at Georgia Tech, covering Georgia Tech during the Clemson fans will remember this, the infamous Jeff Collins years where, they lifted weights on the sidelines and all 9 yards with that. So it was kind of crazy, and this is no disrespect to Georgia Tech, but it was a thing where they had a program that I would say obviously not as high profile as LSU, and the media access was largely kind of like what you've said with Clemson. I mean, we had some, but it wasn't really, I would say it's very protected. There's very guarded in terms of there. I came down here 3 years ago and they were fresh off of kind of the end of the Ed Orgeron debacle. And it's one of those things where, Brian Kelly's been very open, and that surprised me, to be honest. There's a program like LSU where you kind of feel like there might be things that, and I mean this in the nicest way, not things that you want to hide, but hey, it's a high-profile program. You want to protect things. They don't operate like that there. So having been at two different programs that are very different in stature and brand value, for them to have kind of what I perceive may be the opposite attraction, a place like Georgia Tech where you want to invite more coverage, where LSU is very open with their coverage, is very different. So no, it's been great in terms of letting the media get an idea of what's going on. I mean, we've been able to watch, and I know I'm saying this and you're probably like, man, I wish we had this over here, but it's just one of those things where we feel like we've been able to see, multiple 11-on-11 scrimmages, multiple full pad sessions, multiple individual drills, one-on-one battles, 7-on-7s, to where I'm not saying I know what I'm talking about all the time, but we feel like we can make a pretty, informative guess about what we feel about different position groups based off of that. So, yeah, I wasn't expecting it, Larry, when I got down here, but it's definitely something that's kind of surprised me. And, as any journalist, you like when the university or the athletic department or communications and coaching staff understands that we have a job to do and we know they have a job to do. And Brian Kelly just trusts that. I don't know if it's because he's been in the business as a head coach for 30 plus years, but it's just been something that I've been pleasantly surprised and enjoyed.
Given that they, to date, have not gotten to the playoff and have not done the things that, they hired him to do, has there been an undercurrent from some fans, subscribers to your site of, hey, like, we don't want this stuff out there, and this might not help us? And also, like, what is the positive that LSU's football program gets out of that? Because they're going to get covered. They're going to get covered nonstop, no matter what.
Exactly.
So I'm just curious for your insight into that part of it.
Yeah. Well, first off, yeah. No, I mean, no doubt that people have said, if we post clips and in terms of what we actually get to video and publish, people start to kind of say, well, hey, why are they letting them film 11-on-11 and formations and goal line drills, and not just goal line drills, but like formations you're going to run in the goal line. Like, why are they letting them film it? And then why are they letting them report on this? And so, yeah, it's like I said, it's a stark contrast to where I've been before. But fans have definitely become antsy, and that's going to happen no matter what. I mean, you don't make the playoff, you don't win championships here. It doesn't matter, how nice of a guy you are, and if you win 9 games a year, that's not the standard at LSU. So it's definitely a sense of, hey, let's just keep it under wraps and, let's play and just don't show anybody anything. And the media doesn't need to be there at all. And we have to rely on sources. But the fans feel like that. But I guess the staff is just kind of, wanting to keep the same old in terms of what they've been doing. So it's kind of interesting to at least hear how, other places go about it differently. It's, like I said, a stark contrast.
Surface level, which is obviously not your level of following LSU. The notion of Brian Kelly is, of course, his initial introduction, the dancing on the recruiting video, the fake Southern accent. How was that received by hardcore LSU folks in the moment? And sort of fast forwarding big picture to now, does it feel like he's one of them? Does it feel like he's really ingratiated himself and they're happy with him? Obviously, their happiness hinges on wins and winning big, but I'm just curious, like, has he become a likable part of that football crazy community?
Well, you hit a nail on the head when you talked about football crazy community, right? It's football starved. I mean, these people are, raring at the opportunity to kind of play, other than the practice film we put together. But yeah, I mean, going back to Kelly, I'll put it like this. As a person who's not from Louisiana, first time I stepped foot in Louisiana was for this job. I think it provides me a unique opportunity to speak on this because I'm not necessarily – didn't grow up in the culture that is Louisiana. Now, look, I love it. It's a special place. It's a very family-oriented state in terms of how they, just gravitate towards each other. I mean, the old adage of, the people who live here, don't necessarily move away. I mean, people live here, die here. They put roots here. And so I think there's a uniqueness to that, and it makes it what it is. I mean, it's a cool place to live. But for Kelly, there was obviously concerns about fit and culture. And, I think it's also, you kind of have to take with a grain of salt when you talk about things like that, because yes, it does matter, but if you win, nobody cares, right? I mean, one of the greatest coaches that LSU's seen come through, was a guy named Skip Bertman on the baseball side of things, won multiple national championships. He was, nowhere near the Louisiana culture. I mean, this is a guy who was, from Florida, grew up Jewish. I mean, it's just one of those things where he wasn't he wasn't Ed Orgeron, right? And I think when people assume that, well, you got to be part of the culture, that I don't necessarily think it means like understanding the state. Like Brian Kelly's put the staff around him, led by Frank Wilson, running backs coach and associate head coach, to understand the state. That's fine. Kelly's a CEO type, and he's done a good job, I think, of integrating himself into the community, both he and his wife and his family. Multiple events that they go throughout the year, hosting different events. So I don't necessarily think it's that. Now, kind of going back to the fake Southern drawl, the dancing and everything like that. I mean, look, the one thing I'll take away from Brian Kelly, he's got that dry dad humor. Like, it's very much just like, there's a lot of jokes that don't hit very well in the press conferences, and everyone's kind of looking around and he has to kind of explain them. But to me, there is an aspect of where, I feel like he is a likable guy. I mean, just with my interaction with Kelly, I've never had anything where I come away and be like, yeah, that wasn't genuine. I'll say this, and I haven't really put this out there, but I've mentioned earlier, I've got a daughter who's a 1-year-old, and, he made it a point at media days last year, about 2 months after she was born, to say, hey, congratulations. And that's just something that, I appreciated, and he sat there and talked about being a dad for about 5 minutes. I mean, this is during media days, where the local media is doing the scrum. So I think there's a lot of things where people have their perceptions and they have their ideas made up about who Brian Kelly is. And I understand that. Like, I understand there's maybe a public perception. For me, I can only speak to the personal interactions that I've had. And I think that he is he's an interesting guy. He's definitely got that dry sense of humor, but you got to win here, and I think people will obviously love him even more if he delivers with an SEC title or a playoff appearance and multiple wins. I mean, does it have to be a national title? LSU fans will tell you yes, but we know how hard it is to go through the gauntlet of a season that is the regular season now, and then plus you've got to play multiple really good teams to even get to the national title game.
It's so funny, or not funny, but fascinating, your insight into him behind the scenes, because I had my own notions of him before the last month or this summer, really, when I started actually sitting down and watching the entirety of his press conferences. And previous to that, my only notion was him pounding the table after they lost the opener last year. And it's like, I'm not saying I had a bad, take on him, but I'm like, man, this guy is engaging. He's smart. He is open to just about any question there is. He seems to be on a first-name basis with most of you folks over there. And maybe not totally dissimilar to how Dabo is viewed from afar compared to what he's really like, sort of closer to the bubble here. So kind of maybe somewhat of a similarity there.
Yeah, no, it's you mentioned obviously that fact there about how he, we'll call the media by name. Like, just this past Monday, he comes in game week wearing a suit and makes a joke at a couple of media members who are maybe not even in a golf polo, but maybe they're just wearing a t-shirt. He's like, "Come on, guys, we got to dress up." So just stuff like that. It's I would say he has a friendly banter back and forth with the media at times, and I do understand where it comes off snark at times, and I do see that. I think part of that too is also just being a guy from the Northeast, right? Like, it's just, it's a different tone than people are typically used to down here.
All right, I went to one LSU home game in, I think, 2002 or 3. I think it was 3. Georgia played there. I was covering the Bulldogs. Obviously blown away by that experience, not just inside the stadium, but outside. The smells of tailgating are totally different than everywhere else. It's like this haze of bourbon and crawfish. And then, of course, the national championship in New Orleans. Just LSU fans are, and I say this in a loving way, they're just different, and they make college football so much cooler. How, I guess the question that we've been talking about on our message board this morning is, how many fans do you think will be here in the Clemson area and not even be at the game? What's your guess?
Man, that's we've had conversations with a couple fans on our message board, and then obviously just seeing fans around Baton Rouge. I think they're going to travel well, to be honest with you. I mean, I think it's going to be a group that travels well. There's going to be people inside the stadium. I saw some of the ticket prices. They're just astronomical right now. I think like the get-in price I saw yesterday was like $345, and that's upper level. And I've been to, a spring game at Clemson, but I've never been to a game in terms of a Saturday night. So I can't imagine what it's going to be like. But, there's going to be tailgating galore. I mean, for Clemson fans that don't know, you're talking to someone who didn't grow up an LSU fan. So there's no bias built in here. How do we put this? LSU fans are ruthless, okay? But they'll invite you and they'll give you something to eat, and they'll send you on your way. They'll tell you your team sucks, but they'll send you on your way and say, hey, we're going to make sure you're fed pretty well. So that's one thing that I have definitely realized, and so I expect to be the case, this weekend. And I can, look, I was at a quick story time for you, and this is obviously on the baseball side of things, but as Clemson fans are probably aware, LSU baseball are just an animal in terms of what they do. But Tennessee came down this past year, and you've got LSU fans tailgating all around Alec Box Stadium, and we're hanging out with some friends and family and friends and everything like that at a tailgate, and look, they invite the Tennessee fans in, tell them they're going to beat them pretty bad in a colorful way, and then send them on with some crawfish and then say, hey, come back tomorrow, we'll feed you again. So it's just that Southern hospitality, but also letting you know that they want to beat the dog out of you. So they'll be there full force. I don't know what it'll be like inside the stadium, but I do tell you they will be tailgating. Clemson better be careful. They might show up tonight. I mean, and instead of tailgates, it's kind of crazy like that.
I liken it to, they are the sports version of Deadheads. I don't know. They're just wild and different, and just there's a lot of them. One of the funny things from this morning is somebody revealed that LSU fans had rented out one of the restaurants here, Walk-Ons, which is actually originated in in Louisiana, of course. I think there are 2 in Baton Rouge, and the reactions run the gamut on the message board, and one person said, well, I'd rather have them all in one place instead of all spread out. And I responded and I said, I have some news for you. They're going to be in that one place, and they're also going to be really spread out. There's going to be tons of them that they're not going to be able to fit into one establishment for sure.
Oh, no. And I know I did hear you say, you mentioned obviously Walk-Ons. That's obviously a popular establishment down here. It's going to extend beyond that. I tried to mention, SO Club to a bunch of people. Is my one time going up there. They should probably check out. So it's going to be the fanfare is going to be absolutely just electric. It's what, to be honest with you, it's what made us fall in love with college football there. I think that's what we're going to see inside and outside the stadium on Saturday.
Can you tell me what it was like for you, your first LSU game, and I guess preferably night game, and you had been around college football before? What struck you as the most unique or different things there compared to quote-unquote big-time college football everywhere else you had been?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, look, I grew up in Georgia, I'm not going to lie to people. I lived in Columbus, Georgia, so I grew up a Georgia fan, but we were 30 minutes from Auburn, so we always went to Auburn. Like, we just went to games at Auburn, right over the state line, all that kind of stuff. And so, I have been in some places where there's been some great atmospheres, but you always hear, right? Like, when you grow up in this part of the country, and even nationally, honestly, there's nothing like a Saturday night in Death Valley. I know that I just perked some ears when I said that. I get that. I understand that. I'm not out here calling anybody Death Valley Jr. or anything. But it's one of those things from the fanfare, from the time you get to about 3 miles from campus, it's a different world. It really is. And, I remember my first game, and it was like, okay, this is awesome. This is awesome. But then there's some games where they tell you, hey, you're about to experience the full effect of Tiger Stadium at night. And I remember, my first year, there were some really good ones, but last year, the Ole Miss game, I don't know what they do at Clemson, but at LSU, they let you on the sideline about 6 minutes left in the ball game. And so with that game, coming down the wire and then going to overtime, I got to watch the rest of the game from essentially in the end zone where they made the touchdown pass in overtime to win the game. And, from a fan interaction standpoint, from how loud that place gets, they don't need to pipe stuff in. I mean, these people, they start tailgating. I joked with you, but they start tailgating Thursday, Wednesday. You see the RVs start to pull into town coming down I-10, Wednesday morning, and they set up shop. Classes are still going on. I don't know if anybody's there, respectfully, but they're getting ready, for a Saturday night. And so, look, it's one of the premier venues in college football. It is one of the premier atmospheres, if not the best atmosphere in college football. I mean, and like I said, for your listeners and everything, like, take it from me as a guy who didn't grow up here, is not an LSU fan, did not grow up there, is a fan of college football and has been to, multiple places in the ACC and multiple places in the SEC. It's different. It really is. And so, like I said, I mean, hey, they feed even the media, so it's awesome. I was walking by a tailgate 2 years ago before the Florida game, which Clemson fans recall. That was the one where Jaden Daniels really kind of cemented his spot as the Heisman Trophy winner. And, people got jambalaya, pastalaya, gumbo, and then they're just handing bowls out to people. And you think you're at a soup kitchen, and then you're like, hey, no, this is really, really good. And then that measly stuff that comes out of a can, and, as the media, you're like, I'm going to stay here. Like, you got a TV, I'll cover the game from out here. I'm good. Like, it's just one of those things that it's what makes college football special. And I don't know about you, Larry, but there's a reason that I love college football more than the NFL. And as a guy who grew up in the South, college football is king. This is one of the reasons why. It's just one of those unique places that really bears the character of what makes college football special.
Do they still serve booze to the media after in a press box? They
don't. I actually heard a story about that last weekend. We were getting ready for the last fall scrimmage, and funny enough, we decided to go get some dinner before because we knew they weren't feeding us. And one of the media members who's been there for a while, he goes, "Well, y'all missed the days when they were serving booze up here." And I looked at him and I was like, "What? Like, huh? Like what? Like that? Like." Not. We're not talking about beer and wine either.
Liquor.
I mean, we're talking. You know what I mean? Like, you want a Jack and Coke, or you want some, raw. I mean, just that's scary. That's wild.
Again, Bryce. That's how old I am. I when I was there in 2003, they did serve booze after the game in the press box, and I can neither confirm nor deny that there's a correlation between that and my ever having since said that Baton Rouge LSU is the best college football atmosphere. So, hey, so we have to get. I'm fascinated to hear what a lot of the LSU folks think of their experience at this Death Valley. In fact, we have a subscriber who on our message board said he was taking 4 LSU fans, I want to say, friends of his, to the game, primo seats. He wants to give them the full experience, and he said, I hope nobody's mad at me or whatever. And I said, okay, you can do it under one condition, that you come back Sunday or Monday and give a full accounting of how their experience went. And so I'm fascinated to hear that, fascinated to hear what you think about it, and everybody else. Just what a what an honor to be able to write about this type of game for a living. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait, and I hope you have a great time as you come up here and experience it for the first time, for the first non-spring game, I guess, experience, which of course a lot different.
No, it will be. My lone experience at Clemson was the spring of 22. Like you mentioned when you read off my LinkedIn profile up there, I did some broadcast work, some play-by-play, where essentially I had a doubleheader. My dad and I went up there. Typically try to take my dad on the trips that I can, because he's one of the biggest reasons that I fell in love with the sport. And I ended up calling, it was like a noon softball game. It was the first year of the softball program, which I'm sure you were like really good team. They were a lot of fun to watch. So I called a softball game against North Carolina, called a volleyball match that night. And in between was the spring game. And so we had a Clemson fan hook us up with some tickets. He could tell we were from not around there. And man, it was awesome. So I'm excited just in terms of like the campus and the atmosphere in and around Clemson. Like, that was awesome. I can't imagine what it's going to be Saturday. I've got some family friends that live in Greenville. They're going to be tailgating. Their daughter goes to school there. And it's funny enough, they're actually originally from Baton Rouge. And so they've got a lot of friends coming up from LSU that are going to stay with them. And so it's going to be great. I mean, this is, like I said on our podcast, we can talk about an actual game, right? When you're blessed with an opportunity to cover programs like Clemson, LSU, you get to talk about high profile matchups like this, which is, man, this is why we do what we do.
Thank you so much, Bryce. I'll let you get back to being a dad.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Larry. Look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Are you excited yet about college football, about this game? If you're not, something's wrong. Really appreciate the support of our sponsors for continuing to help make this happen. And the greatest thanks to every one of you for continuing to listen after all these years. I believe it's been 7 years. It's been a lot of fun, and we plan to continue it for many years to come. Everybody be safe. Cheers.